Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties, from Keweenaw to Monroe, Chippewa to Berrien. Brought to you by the Michigan Association of Counties. Here's your host, MAC Executive Director Stephen Currie.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the only podcast by the Michigan Association of Counties. We've got the whole band back together this week. It's been a few weeks. We didn't do a podcast last week. Before that, Deena was out doing whatever it is Deena does sometimes. And I think she was doing lobbying things, we'll say, lobbying stuff.
It really was lobbying stuff. Thank you very much. The same way you do lobbying stuff.
Yes.
On the golf course.
Yes. Sometimes my best work's on the golf course. But no, thanks everyone for joining. Good to have everyone back. Lots to talk about, so we'll go ahead and jump right in it. First of all, thanks, before we do that, thanks to DTE Energy for sponsoring. Of course, if you have questions throughout the podcast, you can type them in the chat question area, and we will go ahead and get those answered as best we can. So first off, there was a webinar last week. I was on vacation, so I did not get a chance to see it or hear it. But I am anxious to hear a little bit more about it. So Deena, Meghann, there was a webinar, I think State Treasury put it on the ARP funds.
Yeah, so the State Department of Treasury's done, I think this was like the 13th webinar that they've done since COVID started. And originally it started out as, just really informational for local units of government on, what the state's response were, what all the emergency orders were, where they could go for information, how, what it really meant. And then it evolved into, sort of what are the impacts to local governments, revenue. Then we went into CARES Act funding and how locals could, allocate their CARES Act dollars or access CARES Act dollars. This one was extremely informative, and there were well over 1,000 people on it this past week, wow, where the Department of Treasury went through and talked about the American Rescue Plan. But more specifically, they addressed both those entitlement units, which are those counties directly, and then the larger cities that were getting direct money out of American Rescue Plan dollars. And then they also addressed non-entitlement units. So those were the townships, the villages, and the process that they have to go through to access these monies. But then they went through and talked about what allowable uses are and how to calculate revenue loss, which is extremely complicated. And they gave several examples. So I just want everybody out there to know that, number one, it was a great webinar, and you'll be able to find the link to the webinar on our website or go to Michigan Department of Treasury's website to look at it. They also made available all of the slides that they used for that. And then there's also a list of questions and answers and questions that we couldn't get to. Because Steve, at the end of each one of these webinars, it's us, it's MML, and it's MTA, and we ask very specific questions that our members have submitted either prior to the webinar or during the webinar. And so but the Department of Treasury does try to go back and answer the ones that we actually couldn't get to. So it's extremely helpful, and there's a ton of information out there. The Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist was, on this last webinar, as was the State Budget Director, Dave Masseron. And you know what? I forgot to tell you this. Masseron also talked about that proposal that we put out there for the state's $3.9 billion that we want them to allocate to match funds for local units of government. So that was pretty encouraging, that document that we put together in conjunction with MML and sent to the state. He referenced it and really, encouraged our members to slow down, don't allocate funds yet. Let's look at what these, match programs can be, and that there was a lot of common ground, I think, in those proposals. So it's pretty cool. It's a good webinar.
Yeah, it's good. Go ahead, Meghann. Sorry.
No, I was just going to follow up as your counties, and you have conversations and you have ideas, or you put together different documents and things that can be shared with other counties just to kind of be a resource, please send that to us. Obviously, we're just trying to kind of gather all the information from anyone and everyone. We'll put Treasury's information out. But anything we can kind of just share so that counties are and the commissioners are getting all this information to kind of take it in, please, just think about that as you are having these conversations with your boards and administration, and kind of just keep everyone, I think, keep the wheels spinning. How can we come together on this, and what are other counties doing? I think we can hopefully be a portal for everyone.
Yeah, that brings up a great point too, which we talked about this afternoon earlier when we had our legislative meeting. We will be creating having a ARP resource page, which will be sharing a lot of these documents on. The Treasury information will be on there. Whatever we hear from the federal folks on guidance, things like that will be on there. We'll also make available those consultants that have been pre-qualified for counties to use. We'll put a link to those contracts on there. So much like we did during COVID, our COVID resource page, we're going to make an ARP resource page as well. So like Meghann said, if you have documents that are working for you and you feel like other counties could take advantage of that, please send them to us. And we will, of course, get those posted on there. Deena touched on the revenue calculation being very complicated. We do have a calculator through Government Finance Officers Association has a calculator. We'll put that on this resource page as well, so folks can have that on there, so they can have access to it. Moving on, unless there was anything else on the ARP funds you guys wanted to tag on there. Okay, good.
I don't think so.
One thing we've been doing, and I think it's probably been the past 3 years now, maybe 4, we've been kind of getting together with other countywide elected officials. It doesn't have to be countywide electeds. It's kind of expanded now to local public health is on there, is part of it as well. But we've been getting together with these associations and their leadership to kind of talk about what we're working on, hear a little bit more what they're working on, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So these include the sheriffs, the prosecutors, registered deeds, clerks, local public health, like I mentioned. Am I missing anyone?
Prosecutors.
So it's a real good group. We have great participation with their leadership, and we just, it's an informational exchange, and it takes a good couple hours to get through. We don't obviously go through every issue every organization is working on, but kind of the higher tier ones that we feel like we could come together with and help each other out on. So we had that meeting this morning. President Kleinfeld, MAC Board President Kleinfeld was there, and much of our staff was there. Deena, why don't you touch on first some of the issues that kind of perked your interest, that not only, let's not talk too much about what we're working on, but maybe some of the other groups that you work with brought to the table.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues that we have in common. So you're absolutely right, Steve. We can't go through all of them. But one of the things that we try to do as much as possible during these summits is to come to some sort of common ground with them. We want to be able to support the countywide electeds, and we want them to support us in a lot of our policy efforts. And I think for the most part, we do that. I know Meghann has a little bit more participation from these countywide electeds on her committees than I necessarily do. I do have the treasurers that participate on mine, but I don't really see the others quite as often. So this is extremely helpful. We talked about there's a package of bills called Zillow bills. So those are one of the things that we haven't really talked about here, but that we call them the Zillow bills because it's really Zillow trying to negotiate and mandate in state statute a bulk rate for a lot of the information that they want and use on their website. So treasurers and registers of deeds are really not in favor of them, and I completely understand why. Each individual county has already negotiated that rate out. So that's an issue where we'll back them up on that, especially because sometimes some of those funds trickle over to the county general fund, and they also help to support those departments in their efforts. So we will absolutely back them up on those bills and do whatever we can do, to oppose them or, make them much more palatable than they are. They talked about things like, moving up the primary election to June, maybe May, but most likely in June. and how difficult it is to have the primary election in August. Just the lack of time that they have between then and the conventions to get, things put together. So, those are just a couple of the issues. I know there were several that, Meghann talked about, which I thought were extremely.
Yeah, Meghann, why don't you touch on a
Yeah.
couple of those?
Yeah, well, especially on the sheriff and prosecutor side of it, like Deena mentioned, we talk to them a lot in committees, but we share a lot of concerns with the mental health proposals that are out there between the House and the Senate, and how to change some of those funding structures and administrative oversight, and really ensuring that that stuff stays more local, because our county commissioners talk to their sheriffs and their prosecutors and deal with mental health issues in their jails, and they know what their community needs. And if we shift this to more of state oversight, then you're going to lose a lot of that connection. So those conversations are really helpful around that table. Things like truth in sentencing, and where the prosecutors and law enforcement come in and tell us, the maximum and minimum sentences are important to stay there to make sure that we're protecting those victim rights. And so I know our commissioners are, looking to their prosecutors and law enforcement locally to say, is this good? Is this bad policy for the victims, for defendants, whoever it is? And so just to have those kind of conversations at the association level is really, really helpful as well. So I think it's interesting. We had local public health on today. I think this might have been their first or second time. But something that they had mentioned is the difficulty that they're seeing with workforce retention. Someone that, might have been slated to be the health officer in the next year or two, have been groomed. They've had a lot of stress the past 16 months. Maybe are rethinking it, right? And I think we see that a lot around a lot of county offices. Obviously, our law enforcement, sheriff departments have been under a lot of scrutiny lately as well. And so, it's really interesting when we have everyone at the table sharing similar concerns.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. We always, I know we always kind of say this when we walk out of those meetings, but it was very informative. And it always seems to, when we walk away, it's like, I'm glad we're doing these. We're fairly consistent with them. We do them once a quarter-ish, depending on people's schedule. It's tough to get everyone's schedules together, but when we do them, I think they're beneficial to everyone involved. And we appreciate all those other groups taking the time to keep us up to speed on what's important to them too.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on, Deena, Representative Cambenzi has a package. Is it a package or a bill that?
No, there's two bills, but yep.
Two bills that could mean potential revenue for counties to help with the influx of, or I guess to help with the stress on public safety during, mainly summer months due to, increased tourism, things like that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is an issue that Representative Cambenzi's been working on for quite some time, and she is from the Upper Peninsula. And forgive me, I can't remember which county she's from right now, and I know I should know, but I don't remember. To Upper Peninsula, and she, up there, they're really dealing with a lot of influx of tourists, especially after COVID. People go up there, yes, in the summer months, and they enjoy, the Upper Peninsula and all the natural resources there. They kayak and they hike, and they camp, they're there all the time. Well, that tax base does not necessarily have the money to support a larger first responder workforce, sheriff's department, emergency, 911. So the problem comes in when you have an influx of tourists, you don't have enough staff to cover some of their needs, and you don't have the tax base to hire more people. What do you do? So she came up with what she calls the tourism reinvestment tax. And this would be basically a bed tax on hotels, motels, and Airbnbs, where they would pay a certain amount of money, a certain percentage of whatever that bill is. And then that would go back to the county, and for the county to share with the municipalities, maybe who are responding to these emergencies, but really dedicate it toward public safety. It's not just a blanket. It would have to be voted on by the people in the county in order to put this tax on the beds. But it's a good way to help bring in revenue that isn't necessarily on those residents and the taxpayers who live there. So and it was part of our priorities this year. So we set that up as part of our priorities in our MAC priorities document, and want to support her as much as possible. I think what we're going to do is put together a sample resolution for counties to take a look at, look at the legislation, and then pass that sample resolution to just so support in the legislature.
Yeah, great. That's a potential way to leave some financial stress on counties. And I think it's, we've seen it over the past year, at least, the increase in tourism, especially with COVID. And I don't think it's died off at all this year.
And it's not just in the summer, I mean, I was on the UP commissioners meeting a few weeks ago. They have those snowmobile trails, and you got someone dealing on have a breakdown or something happens on a snowmobile, and you have sheriffs that maybe aren't even in that county just trying to respond because the call came in, they might have left schoolcraft and the trail went through a different county, and so that's all they know who to call. And so it's just really complicated once you're in those larger areas and you have high tourism seasons all year round. And
ice fishing, skiing, snowmobiling, yeah. You're right. I mean, it's all the time. So color tours up north. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, a lot of accidents can happen during color tours. You never know. All right, moving along.
Depends on how much fun you're having on your color tours, Steve.
True. You might want to get a designated driver for that. All right, moving on. We're getting close to kind of the July 1st budget deadline-ish that they pseudo work by sometimes when they feel like it, or change it when they feel like it. Why don't we talk a little bit about what we're hearing right now? We've got the budget obviously being worked on. There's still supplemental money out there. Meghann, why don't you kick it off a little bit on what we're thinking?
Yeah, there's been some movement on supplemental funds, really funds that were given from the federal government last, during 2020, not yet this year on the ARC funds, but still trying to allocate those. Some dealing with the school aid budget, some rental assistance programs that are still hanging out there that they need to get done. There's been some movement, but with that movement has also been what we call a shell bill, which is essentially a bill that's just kind of put out there to get the conversation and that section of law opened up so that if they need to move swiftly, they can do so. One chamber basically has it teed up. They can get it back over and get it to the governor's desk as soon as possible. So what they did on that July 1st deadline, so there's a statutory deadline that the legislature must present a budget to the governor by July 1 of this year. It starts this year. This will be the first time they would have that requirement if they do meet a July 1 deadline. But the Senate basically said, just in case we can't get it done this week, we're going to give this opportunity to the House to amend that. So maybe they could amend that statute and say they need to get it to the governor, by August 1 or September 1, or maybe that legislative requirement doesn't start until July 1st, 2022. So they have all these opportunities to essentially extend their deadline to present a budget to the governor. And we do anticipate that probably happens. I think that the Senate, I think they're close. So the conversations seem to be pretty close, but the Senate's only scheduled for this week, and then June 30th, so next Wednesday, they have a session date. Don't know that they'll be here for sure, but the House is also only in next week. They have sessions scheduled, so they're just on a really tight time frame, and there's just a lot of money. And I think when the revenues are higher than anticipated, they've got federal dollars, more money, more problems. That's the end of the story there.
Yep. You would think there'd be more money. It'd make things easier and a little easier to get the budget done. But like you said, more problems.
I think sometimes it's easier to cut than it is to spend more, because there's a lot of members that have a lot of ideas, and it becomes really difficult to pay for everything, and it's hard to pick and choose. So sometimes it's easier just to cut back.
Yeah, right. Well, moving along, it's disappointing to hear that we're going to be working on a budget through the summer, but hopefully sooner rather than later. Let's move along, because we do want to be mindful of people's time. For your county commissioner terms, Deena, why don't we do a quick update on that? Of course, then we'll do questions. Feel free to type your questions in the chat there and we'll get them answered. But Deena, why don't you give us a quick update on for your county commissioner terms?
For your county commissioner terms, passed out of the Senate, 32-4, really, really good support. Went over and was referred to the House Committee on Local Government and Municipal Finance. It's chaired by Representative Julie Calley from Ionia. Good news is that Representative Calley also had these same bills in her committee last legislative term in the Elections Committee, and she took them up, voted them out, and supported them. So we're going to talk to her. I think Meghann and I are going to have nice long podcast conversation with her for next week, but do believe that she is in support and we'll take them up soon. That does not mean that I need everybody to just sit back and relax. I would love to see more resolutions passed and call your representatives and ask them to support it, but it's making progress.
Yeah, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. And yeah, she will be our interview for next week's podcast, and I encourage you to tune in for that. She's got a great radio voice. We always talk about her radio voice. If you've ever heard her chair a committee,
Very pretty too. She's
That
gonna
too.
look great on camera.
but her, I mean, I can't say that. You can say that. I can't
I
say
can say it.
but the very soothing voice. It's like, I feel like she should be an audible book reader or something like that. All right, let's see if we got any questions. Derek, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have questions. Stan Ponstein over in Kent County, the County News by NACO featured an article about art funds being used to boost tourism organizations. Is this true? And I was just thumbing through the article just a minute ago, and it appears kind of in two areas where a Florida county was using art money to replace hotel tax revenue they had lost. And then Ingham County here in Michigan was using art money to funnel that to the local Chamber of Commerce to help tourism related businesses. But
I can't say whether or not that's true. I can say that some of the guidance that we read though, it says, first of all, have you identified a problem or a need because of COVID? And so, I guess, dealing with an influx of tourism or how you deal with tourism is sort of a side issue from COVID. I mean, we saw it all over the state, people outside doing much more activities, more use of our parks and, more just outdoor activities. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and I think from the revenue loss standpoint, that seems pretty cut and dry to me. I mean, because there are counties already, right, Deena, that already have hotel motel taxes of over a certain population threshold that they were able to have that. So there are counties that have that tax now and could potentially have lost out on it due to COVID. So next up, Derek.
next question, Mary Babcock, is the bed tax only for the UP or for the entire state?
She wrote it for the entire state, but each county would have to vote on it themselves. So if, Clinton County wanted it, they would have to put it up for a vote of their electors. And if they voted for it, then Clinton County could assess the bed tax.
Great.
Next question, Roseanne Marchetti. What help is available for a county, township, or village to navigate the art processes? Is there a person or business that would be able to help? That's teed up for you, Steve.
Yeah, we've got 4 pre-qualified vendors that'll be on that ARP resources page. Derek posted a link to it in our chat there. You can click on that. 4 available pre-qualified vendors that have all experience with working with the federal government and can help you through the process. And there's a variety of ways they can do that. And basically you contact them, tell them what you need, and they'll kind of go through what they have available for you. By pre-qualified, these were run through the Livingston County procurement process. So they were publicly bid. There's, I think, 7 or 8 vendors that responded to that bid, and these were the 4 that were selected as pre-qualified. So all offer basically the same resources. It's up to the individual counties or entities to determine which one they want to use. And the contracts the links to the contracts are up there too.
Okay, next question, Kelly Scott. Have you talked with the treasurers about the Raffaelli case and implications on the surplus delinquent tax revolving funds to the county general fund.
Yes, ma'am, we have. And that was actually one of the conversations that we had this morning in our county summit with the treasurers. Now, I understand that there are still additional legal challenges to the process. And so we're going to dig into that and have a meeting later to go a little bit further into the details. But I mean, the fallout from the Raffaele cases is exactly that. I mean, it's gonna be felt across the state. I understand that, I think we're gonna probably have to litigate some of the implementing legislation. From what I understand, that there are some challenges to what costs could be eligible or should be eligible. But yes, those conversations are still ongoing. And if you want to talk about it more, don't hesitate to call me.
Okay, next question. Tara Griffith, is there an update on the revenue sharing restoration?
It's an ask. It is an ask, and I think I mentioned earlier that not only did we make the ask from both, the House and the Senate and the state budget office, but we also included that in our American Rescue Plan dollar request, that $3.9 billion that we sent to the state budget office and to legislative leaders asking for additional funds. So we're working on it. I don't know if it's going to be in this budget or not. We're still asking for it. If anything, if it doesn't, then we're going to push for it to be in the supplemental after that.
And that's the end of our questions.
All right, great. Well, thanks everyone. Deena, Meghann, thank you. You guys have anything you want to finish us off with today?
Just want to welcome you back, Steve, to go surfing while you were gone. What'd you do?
No, I didn't surf. I body surfed. I did some body surfing, some boogie boarding. Caught a
Okay.
shark.
Sounds wild.
Caught a shark.
Caught a shark. Wow.
Shark. Yep.
Wow.
It was great. 4.5
Big
foot
shark, little shark. Okay.
4.5 foot.
It's almost as tall as I am.
It's true.
Your own short joke. Wow. That was fast. I didn't even have time to process it.
She was heading it off before one of us
Yeah.
off.
I know.
All right, great. Thanks everyone. Thanks to DTE Energy for sponsoring, and look forward to Julie Callie next week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83, the go-to source for all information about Michigan's 83 counties.